Hi, this is Mary Lee again from Earth Mother Health Foods here in Farmington, Missouri. I talked to you last week in front of these Indians, and I'm back here doing it again. You can see this quilt back in this glass case, and guess what? We've lost the key to the case. So we had to move it over behind me so you can at least see it's in this case. Hopefully we'll find the key without having to break in there and be able to show it to you in person. But there's a story, another story written about the quilt. I call it Great Grandma's Indian Quilt. I remember as a child, we'd always go see my grandma. Grandma lived about 13 miles from where we lived out in the country on that hillside farm. And we'd go in to see her every weekend. And when we would go there, every time, not every time, but every so many months, one of us would say, either one of us kids or my mom or somebody would say, "Can we see the quilt?" And it was just so special to us. And Granny, we'd go back in Granny's bedroom. She had one of them old sleigh beds, like real antique-like. And then she had a cabinet made in the wall where that quilt fit in there, and it was covered over and protected. And she'd bring it out like this precious cargo, you know. And she and my mom would open it up on the bed, and we'd stand there and ooh and ah and admire it, you know. And we know it was probably actually mostly made on the Illinois side, but I entered it in Silver Dollar City down at Branson quilt contest, and it was the only Indian quilt that had Indian design on it, and that was pretty special. And it placed, and it's in this book of quilts, and we know it was probably partially made in Missouri because they traveled back and forth across the Mississippi River. She delivered babies on both sides of the river. It's very possible. Fact is, the scraps of this quilt were found in one of the houses they were living in here in Missouri. So she was kind of back and forth across the river there, and she could have easily, and I explained that to them, and they were cool with it. So anyway, but this is what the book looked like that she was in, and then this is the picture, and it shows these vines all the way around the edge of the, let's see, well, I got the wrong thing, didn't I? Yeah, that's it, that recall. Yeah, that, you can see those vines at the bottom of the quilt. See, it's like a leaf and a hide, and that represented, and it was attached to the vine, like the vine of life, sort of. You know, that was their lifeline, the things that they ate, the things that they needed for clothing, like a hide and stuff like that. And so they named it. It was amazing how they could, how they knew how to find out all this stuff about that quilt. It was dyed with natural plants. They could tell that. They think it was probably made in about 1860 or something, or past 60, 70, something like that. And then they think it was quilted like in the early 1890s, something like that. But it was all dyed from natural products, you know, like plants and bark of trees or whatever to make those colors. And that's pretty awesome too, you know, that she knew how to do all that sort of thing. Because I've told you before, she was a midwife and granny doctor on both sides of the river. And she used to always say she wished that she had a nickel for every little head she caught, you know. And I have a picture of her when she was a grown woman. I showed you last week. Here she is. That's her. That's Grandma Bettis, Mary Cahill Bettis. Okay. And then the next picture we're going to show you is one of, that's me and my mom. And it was during the bicentennial year, and we had that quilt displays here and there and all over the place. So we've, for someone who didn't get probably 50 miles from her residence where she lived, I put her on the map. I let people know there was such a person and what she accomplished. And I think that's been pretty awesome for me. But anyway, we would always, like I said, go into my grandma's and ask to see the quilt. We'd go through that procedure. When they announced when we went to see the quilt, it ended up in the Hallmark Center out at Kansas City, Missouri. I can't tell you what a thrill. We went out there, my mom and my sister and I, and when we were riding this escalator down into this main big hall, they had it as the featured quilt. How cool is that? And of course, it made me cry then. It's making me cry right now a little bit. But we were so proud of it. Because she probably hadn't been more than, like I said, 50 miles from home. And to help put her on the map, you know. But anyway, I'm just so proud of it. And I've just protected it and trying to keep it safe, you know. But anyway. But the quilt experts were fascinating down there. I didn't realize that they could do that with material, but they can. But we had a house fire in 1988 in where I live out in St. Genevieve County. And that was the first thing my daughter carried out of the house. The most important thing was great-grandma's quilt. And she yelled at me as she was carrying it out the door and said, "I got the quilt." I thought, good, you know. But the house didn't burn. The quilt would have been all right inside. But anyway, I think it actually ended up holding some guns that they carried out of the would-be burning house, too, out in the yard. But anyway, I always think why I'm so touched by her, because she was a midwife and Indian granny doctor. She delivered babies on both sides of the river, and she used to make the remark she wished she had a nickel for every little head she caught. And I think part of why I become so emotional about her, because I think she laid out the trail that I follow, and I'm real proud to be able to keep her work going yet today. And because I got my thirst, I was so thirsty to find out everything she knew about plants. I have some of her plants growing at my home that were on that island. It was a 40-acre island. And she taught my one uncle, Uncle Johnny, and how, you know, all about the plants and the trees and all those sort of things. And I absorbed as much as I could from him, and then ended up studying more. And of course, what we do today here at Earth Mother is so much, I mean, we're into it. We've just gotten into this, we know so much more about the plants than they even did back then. But they knew enough to survive, and they survived. My great-grandmother lived to be 78, which is pretty awesome, you know, back that far long ago, you know. But I think her walk with natural medicine was, she handed the wand to me to keep doing that, and that's what I do today. And remembering always that it's God's medicine. That's what we sell here, you know. And I'm going to close with this, and I hope to have another story for you next week, okay?